Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Beginning Roof Design webinar. My name is Kayla, and I will be presenting for you today. And we also have Philip here with us to answer any questions you might have during today's presentation. Now before we get into working on our plans, let's take a look at our GoToMeeting control panel. By default for our audio options, everyone is set up with use mic and speakers. We do have everyone muted today, so you don't need to worry about setting up a microphone. However, if you're having difficulties hearing me, you might want to select that sound check option. It'll give you a little bit of troubleshooting information so that you can figure out what's going on there. If you're still having problems hearing me after going through that sound check, you can switch over to the telephone option. You'll see a number and an access code appear below so that you can call in and listen in that way. Now Philip is here to answer any of your questions, so if you do have a question for him, go ahead and just type it into this box here at the bottom. Click on send and you'll see your question and then his answer there below. We do have 4 different Home Designer products that we offer. I will be working today in our Home Designer architectural version, so we're going to be using this product today, and everything that we do should apply to all of our Home Designer products. I'll show you where on the website you can look for some additional options, and when we do the Advanced Roof Design webinar, that will be working in Professional, and that one will be specific to that particular version. But everything we do today should apply to all of our Home Designer products. So today we're going to go through some basic roof terms, so we're going to go through our kind of glossary of terms there. We're going to go through the basic styles and how we create them using Home Designer programs, whether it's a gable or a gull wing, a salt box, the different roof styles. We'll create a clear story roof, do an A-frame, we'll take a look at some of our different dormer options, and we'll finish up by working on a plan that is a 1.5 story roof and has some interesting roof options for us so we can see how we can apply those basic styles to a more complex roof structure. And we'll finish up with some question and answers, so throughout, if you have questions, go ahead and type those into Philip, but we'll also have a little time at the end if you have any lingering questions. So now let's jump into our plan. So this is our Home Designer architectural program, and what we're looking at right here is our drawing space. And the very first thing I'm going to do is, you can see I have these crosshairs that are following my mouse. This can be very useful for lining things up. I don't need them today, so I'm going to turn them off. I'm going to go up to my preferences. We'll come down to our edit options and I'm simply going to uncheck to enable the crosshair. So that gets rid of that crosshair for us. Now the very first thing I'm going to do here in my plan is I'm simply going to draw out 4 walls. So I'll grab an exterior wall and we just click and drag to draw that out. So we'll draw a basic box structure here. And as soon as I finish drawing my 4 walls, a couple of things happen. Number 1, you can see it's giving us our living area, so a general square footage of the home. And we also got these green dashed lines. Now these are actually our roof planes. So without my doing anything more than drawing out the walls, we already have a roof over this structure. Now let's take a look at this in 3D, and we'll take a full overview so we can see what we've created so far. And I'm going to immediately get into a glass house view. So we have a number of different rendering techniques that we can use. Glass house is going to let me see this structure a little bit better. So by default, Home Designer programs are going to place what's called a hip style roof onto our plan. And basically what that means is that we have, for every wall that we've drawn, we have a roof plane that's bearing down on that wall. So on every side of our house we have a roof plane bearing down that meet up in the center. Now we're going to open up our build roof dialog here, because this is the dialog that Home Designer is using in order to determine what roof it's going to build. So specifically, we have auto rebuild roofs turned on, which essentially means that when I change my ceiling height or any roof directives in my walls, and we're going to go through this a lot so you'll understand this quite a bit, but if I make any changes, it's going to adjust the roof. Here's where we set our default pitch. So right now it's set to 8 and 12. And the pitch is basically the slope of the roof. So the higher this number, the steeper our slope or our pitch is going to be. Our eave overhang and gable overhang is essentially how much overhang we have hanging off of our wall. We can set our materials for our roof here, so all the different roofing and ridge cap materials that we would be using. And this panel here, our roof styles, is what we're going to be going through here in just a minute. This is how we can use our walls to adjust the way that the roof planes are bearing on those walls. So if we open up any one of these, for instance our gable roof, it's going to give us more information about how we can go about editing and creating this roof style. So if you are working on a plan and you would like some more information on how to repeat the processes that we've done today, you can come down to this roof styles in our build roof dialog and find more information there. Now before we go through those roof styles, there's just a few terms that I want to get straight. I'm going to go back to my floor plan and we're going to create an elevation view. Oh, that was a full camera. So one of our camera options we can do is an elevation. So we're just going to click and drag towards the home so we can see a sort of 2D image of what this home looks like. Then I'm going to go ahead and tile this vertically so we can see our floor plan and our elevation view side by side. So pitch, as we just mentioned, is going to be the slope of the roof. So if we look at a pitch chart, we can see it's our typical rise over run. So for every 1 foot that we move to the left or to the right, depending upon which side we're going, for every 1 foot that we move over, the number that we're putting in the pitch is going to determine the rise. So a 1 in 12 pitch would be this shallow pitch here, and a 12 in 12 would be much steeper. So let's see an example of this. So I'm going to open up my wall here, and in my wall I have a roof panel, which is going to give directives for how the roof plane bearing on this wall will change. So we've opened up our left wall here, and what we're going to do is we're just going to change the pitch. So I'm going to move this over so we can see what happens as we change it. Right now we're set to an 8 and 12 pitch, so let's make that steeper and set it to a 12 and 12 pitch. So you can see just on that one wall it's going to update our pitch to be much steeper. If we want to update all of the roof planes at the same time, I'm going to undo that just by doing Control Z. And if I go into my build roof dialog, I can change that to 12 and 12, and it's going to update for the entire plan. So to review, pitch is going to establish how steep or shallow our roof planes are going to be. Now if we open back up this build roof dialog and we change our overhang, let's do something twice as big, let's do 36 inches, you can see how it's extended the overhang for the entire roof, so it's extending quite a bit below. In fact, if we switch over to a glass house in this view, you can see it's extended 36 inches as opposed to the 18 inches it was before. So if we switch back to a 8 and 12 pitch with an 18-inch overhang, it's going to make that change throughout the entire house. Now, one other thing that adjusts the roof is the actual room itself. So if I open up this room and change my ceiling height, the ceiling height of the room determines where my roof planes are going to start. So if we raise this up to 140 inches, we'll make it a really tall ceiling. It's going to move both the walls and the roof up above with it. And if we lower this ceiling back down, let's do something very short. So if we drop it down to 60 inches, it's going to drop the roof down to 60 inches. This becomes very important later when we're talking about our 1.5 story roof that we're going to be doing, where we have living space in the attic. But let's raise that back up to 109. Just type in 109.5 here. Select OK, and we'll raise that back up to where we started. And there's one more term I want us to understand before we get started on these roof styles, and that's our baseline. So the baseline is very important because it acts as the pivot point for our roof plane. And it sits, we can't really see it in this plan, but it sits on the exact outer edge of our wall. And if we zoom in on our elevation view here, so that is this point right here where the roof plane and the wall come together. Now when we change our pitch, so let's change our pitch again, let's update this to 12. Select OK. The place that it sits on the wall is not going to change. What is going to change is the pitch of the roof. So it's going to pivot right around this point. And for Home Designer Architectural, and all of our Home Designer programs except for Home Designer Pro, we are not able to move that baseline. So it's very important that we understand that the baseline is at the outer edge of our walls. Okay, so now let's exit out of this elevation view, and we're going to tile our full overview and our plan view vertically. Another way that you can go about that is if you come up your window menu, you can select to tile vertically, or you can select Shift F6. We also have the ability to move these windows around, so you can move them into a configuration that works well for your drawing process. And I'm also going to bring our pitch back down to 8 and 12 for this next portion. Alright, so the first style that we're going to work on is our gable. So this is where we have our two ends, our two gable ends, and we have just two roof planes that are bearing down on the opposite walls. So to do this, we're simply going to select a wall that we want to become a gable. And actually, quickly before we do that, I'm just going to make this a little bit more of a rectangular shape as opposed to our square that we had before. So now I'm going to select the wall that I want to become a gable, and we have two ways that we can do this. We can either open up the wall like we did before when we changed the pitch, come down to our roof panel and check the box that says full gable wall, which is going to change it to a gable, or if we do it with this other wall, we have a shortcut. Down here in our Edit toolbar, we have a shortcut that will allow us to, with one click, change it over to a gable wall. So that shortcut is a very quick and easy way to go back and forth between our hip and our gable structures. From here, we're going to move into a gambrel style. So this is where we have two roof planes coming off of each opposite wall. We start out a little bit steeper, and then we go shallower as we reach our ridge point. And I'm going to rotate around a little bit so that we can see the change a little better. So for this change, we need to open up the walls that have roof planes currently bearing on them. So our top and bottom walls here. We'll just open up one to begin with. And in our roof panel, we can see we have our pitch selected here. Let's first change this initial pitch to something steep like 12 and 12. Then we have a checkbox for upper pitch. By selecting this box, what I'm doing is I'm telling Home Designer that this wall is going to have two separate roof pitches coming off. Initially, we're going to start out at a 12 and 12 pitch, and then at a certain distance away from our baseline, which again is on the outer edge of this wall, a certain distance away we're going to start with a different pitch. In this case, we're going to do a 6 and 12. So we can either tell the program to start at a specific height, so that second pitch is going to start however far from the ground, if we know what that is. Typically I use the in from baseline. So however far in from our baseline do we want that second pitch to start. And let's do 60 inches. Then, when we select OK, you can see that change that's applied there. We can do the same thing to the other wall. If we open it up, we're going to change to 12 and 12, select an upper pitch. We're going to leave that at 6 and 12 and select 60 inches in from the baseline. If we rotate around, you can see that gambrel roof style that we've created. Now we're going to do exactly the opposite. So if we do a gull wing, it's going to do a shallower pitch starting off, and then at a certain distance it's going to become steeper. This is a very extreme gull wing. Maybe we'll do one that doesn't go quite so far in from the baseline, so it's more like a flared eave. So if we open up one of our walls, we're going to reverse these. So we're going to start out shallow. Let's start out at maybe a 4 and 12 pitch, and then we'll move to an 8 and 12 pitch. So not very steep, but steeper than our initial pitch. And let's do 24 inches in from the baseline. Now you can see that shallower pitch and then a little bit steeper on the other side. Now I want to get the roof directives in this wall to copy to the other wall. So there's a couple ways I can do this. What I like to do is select the wall, and down in my edit toolbar I'm going to copy it, and then I'll simply click to place it on the opposite wall. So it's going to paste that wall with all of its directives for how the roof is going to look above it on the opposite side, and then the roof is going to match it. So now let's move back into our typical gable. We'll open up the wall, we're going to uncheck an upper pitch, and we're going to change our pitch back to an 8 and 12. And we'll open up this one, uncheck the upper pitch, and this time let's leave our second wall at a 4 and 12 and see what happens. So now we have one wall that's set to 8 and 12 and one wall that's set to 4 and 12. So if we have something like an offset gable, where we have a shallower pitch in the front of the house and a steeper pitch in the back, or vice versa, on a wall-by-wall basis we can set our pitch. And from here we can transition into a shed-style roof, which is going to just have a single roof plane extending from one end of the house all the way across to the other. So I'm going to select this far wall that I want to remove the roof plane from, so that this roof plane is going to extend all the way across to the top. We'll open up that wall, and we have a high shed gable wall option. So I'll select OK, and now it's going to allow the roof plane to extend all the way to the far wall. Notice too how, because we've selected that high shed gable wall, it's created a wall extending all the way up to meet up with our roof plane. So home designer programs are very smart in that they know that you need a wall in between that section. It also might be easy to see this in a standard view. So you can see that wall that extends from the floor all the way up into, it's steep enough it almost might be living space up there. Alright, we'll go back to a glass house. Alright, now let's go back to a gable. So we'll open up our high shed wall, and we'll simply remove the high shed gable wall. And then I'm going to change our roof pitch so they match. So we'll match the 8 and 12 pitch of our other roof plane. Alright, so now we're back to just our standard gable. From here, what I would like to do is a half hip. So what this is it's a gable that also has a hip extending down into the gable. So to do this, I'm going to close out of here and we'll rotate our camera view. I'm going to select my gable wall, open it up, and under the roof option, even though my pitch is grayed out, because if I have a full gable wall checked, that typically means that I'm not going to have a roof plane that's bearing down on my wall. So it's going to remove any pitch because I can't establish a pitch for a roof plane that doesn't exist. However, we do have the option to check our upper pitch. What this means is that I can set a pitch a certain distance in from the baseline of either side of this wall. So this time, in from baseline indicates from the left and the right portion of this wall coming in. So I'm going to set let's do an 8 and 12 so that it matches the rest of the house. And I want that to start, let's do 42 inches. This is going to be a nice big half hip that we're creating here. 42 inches on either side in from the baseline. So we'll select OK. So if we rotate here, you can see that this hip structure starts 42 inches in from the baseline on either side. So if I extend that, let's do more like 72 inches. Select OK. Now that hip is starting 72 inches in from the baseline on either side of this wall. So when we're looking at our half hip, the larger this number, the smaller the half hip we're going to create. But I'm going to transition back to a full hip roof. So I'm going to uncheck upper pitch and I'm going to uncheck full gable. So we're going to set at an 8 and 12 pitch, and we'll do the same thing for the other side. We'll uncheck our full gable, or we could have used our shortcut down here. So now we're back to just a standard hip roof. And from here we're going to transition into doing a mansard style roof, which is going to have our 4 roof planes and then a flat top to our house. So we'll open up the first wall, and one by one we're simply going to select upper pitch so that we're creating 2 roof directives off of every single wall, all 4 of them. So we'll set as close to 0 as we can in our Home Designer programs, and we'll start at 60 inches in from the baseline. Now, Home Designer does something really cool here. Just by my changing one of the walls, what it's going to do is it's going to search for another roof plane to meet up with. So when we set this technically to a 1/4 inch equals 12, which is basically a 0 and 12 pitch, that second roof plane is going to continue until it meets up with the roof plane on the other side. So I don't actually have to open up every single wall in order to make that change. So now we're going to move back to, we'll do a hip and then a gable. I'm going to show you something. If we come up to our Edit menu, we have the option to reset to defaults. So if I do, in this case, first floor is all floors, and we reset the roof directives in walls, it's going to bring us back to our basic hip structure. And then we can select each wall and change them over to a gable. So what I want to show you is some of our dormer options. So we'll come up to our roof options, and one of the options that we have here is a dormer. So in order to place a dormer, we'll simply click to drop that into our plan. Then this is going to move around as one unit, so we can move it to align with the walls below or move it back. We can also use our edit handle to resize it, and we can open it up to find some more options. So here we can change the pitch. Right now it's set to a 12 and 12 pitch for our dormer, so it's a little bit steeper than the house that we have right now. And we can change the overhang for the dormer separate from the rest of the structure. And we can change the gable type, or the type of roof style. By default it's placed a gable roof. That's probably the most common dormer, but we can switch over to a shed style. And this message is simply telling us that our roof pitch is too high to fit in the roof plane that we've selected. So when we switched over to a shed roof, it automatically switched to a 3 and 12. So if I drop down to, say, a 2 and 12 pitch, it's going to be shallow enough to be able to fit within the space that we've selected. Then we can use our edit handles to resize or our move handle to place it correctly. And we can open it back up. Let's go back down to a shorter dormer here, or a narrower rather. And so we even have the option to do like a barrel or an eyebrow dormer just with the click of a button. So you can see that eyebrow dormer placed there. These also can be copied, so if we create a dormer and we want to have a second one, we can use our copy, select the move handle of the existing dormer, pull it out, and pull a copy exactly next to the first. And there are some additional options within our dormers. So first off, we have a wall height, so we can set the height of our walls, which is a little hard to see in an eyebrow, so let's switch over to our shed, or our gable actually. And again, this is just information telling us that it's not fitting within, so we're just going to change it until it does fit within the roof plane. There we go. So the wall height is simply how high the walls are coming from our second floor up to the ceiling height of that dormer. So if we had living space in this attic, we would be able to set the wall height. So later when we do a 1.5 story roof, I'll show you that a little bit more in depth. And then you can manually set the width. Instead of doing our edit handles to resize, you can resize the width here. And we have separate overhangs for our dormers as for the rest of our roof. So typically our dormer is going to have a much smaller overhang than the rest of the roof will. So it's by default set to 6-inch overhang. And then we have our roof return options. So we haven't actually looked at roof returns yet, but if we were to select a roof return, we can do so on a gable, or we can do so within a single wall. So if we open up a wall and we want to do a roof return on it, if I open up this wall and I want to change the roof return, I can come down to my roof and we have an option to select a roof return, which basically just means we're going to have a roof pitch that comes in from the wall on either side of the gable. So just as an illustration here, we can set the length of that, let's do to 42 inches, whether or not we're doing so on a gable wall, and then whether we're going to have a sloping, so an 8 and 12 pitch roof plane, which is matching what our build roof is set to, or whether it's going to be flat across. So when we select OK, you can see that roof return that comes in. Or you can, instead of selecting how far in from the baseline it's going to come, you can also just do a full roof return, which is going to extend across the entire wall. So right now, if we look inside this house, and this might be a little easier to see in our standard view, so if we get out of the glass house and go back to standard, and let's place a window in this dormer. So right now, we actually are extending into an attic space. So we're not actually looking down into the room, and for a dormer of this kind, we would probably want to be looking down into the room so that it was bringing light into the space below. The same thing goes if we're to place a skylight. So a skylight is another one of our options. So if we click to place that in, skylights are actually by default going to extend down into that space, because that's what a skylight is intended to do. Now let's get back into a glass house, but if we remove the ceiling from the room below, watch what happens with both the skylight and then with the way that our dormer is going to see into that room. So we're going to open up the room, and under the structure we're just going to remove ceiling over this room. Not roof, because obviously we want to maintain that roof structure, but that is going to move the ceiling up to meet up with the roof. So it's not actually going to remove a ceiling surface, it's just going to remove a flat ceiling across the room, and extend it up to meet up with the roof planes. So now if we take a 3D view inside this space, you can see we have our skylight and then we have our dormer, and if we place a window on our eyebrow dormer as well, you can see how that's extending down into our space. And if we put that ceiling back on, we're not going to see those dormers, but we are going to have the skylight. It's a little difficult to see in this view. We'll get into a glass house on this side as well. So we are going to have that skylight that's going to extend down into the room. Alright, so now we're going to move into a slightly more complex structure. We're going to do a shed roof. So this is going to be a a salt box roof. This is going to be a 2-story roof, where on one side of our house the roof is going to come off of the 2nd story, and on the back side of the house the roof is going to extend down into the 1st floor. To do this, first we need to build our 2nd floor. So I'm going to exit out of this, and we're going to exit out of this camera view here. And in our floor plan, I'm just going to delete our dormers and our skylight, so we're back to just a simple gable. Delete the windows that we've placed on the dormers as well. There we go. Alright, so now I'm going to go into our floor options, and we're going to select to build a new floor. We'll derive the 2nd floor from the 1st floor plan, which just means that we're going to create walls directly on top of the walls that we have built now. And we'll select OK, and we have our 2-story structure. Now I'm going to pull this back wall back just a few feet, which is going to automatically update the back of our house. And we still have that roof return, so let's go ahead and remove that. Just uncheck the roof return, and we're back to simple gable coming off of our 2nd floor. So one note about this before we move on, notice how this is essentially a shed roof that's coming up to meet up with our 2nd floor. The reason why it's a shed roof is because we have selected these opposite walls to be gable walls. So even if you're not doing a gable structure, so in the back here we don't have a gable where we have the second roof plane extending down, we have a shed roof. That change wall to gable wall is still going to be effective for creating a shed style roof on either side. Because if we remove that, if we change this back to a hip roof, you can see what happens there. So that can be especially helpful for like a porch that you have extending off that has the shed on either side. Alright, but from here, what we need to do is we need to create a situation in which this roof comes all the way up to meet up with the secondary roof plane on the second floor. To do that, I'm going to take this second floor wall, which is this wall right here, and we're going to change it to a knee wall. So I'm going to open up this wall, and in our roof we're simply going to select knee wall, select OK, and automatically it's going to create the exact situation that we were looking for. Now the reason why it does this is because that knee wall directive basically says that we are not going to actually be specifying a roof pitch over that wall, but what that wall is going to do is it's going to meet up with whatever roof plane is above it. So in this case, that knee wall, if we zoom in on our 3D view, this knee wall is simply going to meet up with our first floor roof. Now, this is not quite the scenario that I want because that's far too shallow. So we're going to go down to our first floor, select our first floor wall, open it up, and we can change the pitch to something more like, let's start with 10 and 12, see what that does. So that's a little better. Maybe we'll change that to 12 and 12, make it nice and steep. There we go. And no matter what, that knee wall is simply going to meet up with the roof. So if I move this back, oh, that's our first floor. Let's go up to the second floor. There we go. And we'll move this back. It's going to move the wall right along the roof, and it's not going to have any effect on the roof itself. And one other note about this, if you look over here, we have a black dashed line in the middle of our plan. That is exactly where our flat ceiling ends and where a sloped ceiling begins. So in between this black dashed line and our knee wall, we have a sloped ceiling that's simply matching whatever our roof is above it. Again, that becomes important when we do a 1.5 story later. So whenever you have a scenario where you simply want to have a wall that's going to not affect the roof above it, but meet up with the roof above it, so essentially remove all roof directives from the wall without creating a gable, the knee wall option is a great option for that because it's going to find the nearest roof plane and it's just going to extend it beyond that wall. Alright, so now we're going to do an A-frame roof, and I think I'm just going to exit out of this plan and we'll open up a new one. So we'll start with a blank plan. And this is the style of roof we're going to be working on next. So we're going to have roof planes that extend down to the floor, and we're going to have living space beneath all of that. So we're going to create a loft, which is essentially a second floor in Chief Architect Home Designer programs, and then a first floor area. So first off, we're going to draw the basic exterior structure. We'll just draw out the 4 walls to create the home. And again, it's going to immediately drop in a hip roof structure. So if we take a full overview of that, and we'll switch it over to a glass house again. Alright, so we have our hip structure. So we're going to start by making this into a gable structure. Let's tile these. So we'll change each end to a gable. Just reversed that wall. We'll unreverse that. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the ceiling height. So I'm going to open up this room, and in our structure we're going to reduce the ceiling height down to, let's do 4 inches. We'll select OK, and it's going to drop that roof down to meet up with the ceiling. Now, in our build roof dialog, I'm going to change our pitch. Let's change it to something steep like 18 and 12. And then we're going to get rid of our eave overhang because we don't need that extending down into the ground. Then we'll select OK, and it's going to make those changes for us. Now at this point, my roof is essentially done. It is in the exact position that I want it to be. From here on out, I want to make sure that no changes happen to my roof at all, no matter what changes I make to the interior of the house. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my Build Roof dialog, and we're going to uncheck Auto Rebuild Roofs. So this means that whatever changes I make to my room, so if we were to raise this back up to 109 inches and select OK, so now we can see we have the ceiling at a normal height, so we're going to have living space down here, but our roof has stayed the same. And you can see our dash black lines telling us where in between here our flat ceiling exists, and in between the black flat line and the exterior wall is where the sloped ceiling is, meeting up with the roof. So now the last part of this is we need to create a second floor area for our loft. So we're going to go into our floor options and we're going to select to build new floor. This time I actually am going to select to make a blank plan, meaning we're not going to create walls immediately on top of the ones we've created before. So we'll select OK, and it's just going to bring us up to our second floor and just show the attic walls, which is this triangular wall underneath our roof. That's what these walls are. So we'll begin by connecting these two walls, and then we'll draw over the attic walls to create walls that are going to define a room structure. And once the room is finished, two things happen. Number one, we get another ceiling, and number two, we're seeing these black lines indicating where that ceiling begins. Now I'm going to open up this room, and under structure I'm simply going to remove ceiling over this room, which means that we're going to have a ceiling that directly correlates to the roof, and then we'll select OK. And now I'm going to segment off this room using a railing because we're going to have a loft area in only half of this house. So I'm just going to draw a railing halfway through the house, and in this front area here I'm going to open it up, and under room type we're going to change it to an open below. I also need to make sure to go down because specific rooms have different defaults, so an open below room by default has a ceiling over this room. So I'm just going to uncheck that to make sure we're matching up with our loft room. Select OK, and now you can see, and it's probably easier if we take a camera view. Let's go down to our first floor so we can see this. Take a full camera right in the middle of this structure. So you can see we have our loft area up above, and we have our living area down below, and the roof that extends all the way through both floors. So the key is, it's really helpful to be able to turn off that auto rebuild roofs. If you can get the roof set exactly the way that you want using those ceiling heights in order to move the roof up and down into position, then you can turn off auto rebuild roofs and make whatever changes you want to the interior without changing the roof at all. Okay, so now before we move into our final house, we're going to do one more style here. We're going to do a clear story. Let's exit out of this plan. In fact, we can just exit out of it altogether and open that same plan back up. So a clear story is going to be where we have essentially two shed roofs that come together at varying pitches in order to create a space for light to come into the room. So to do this one, we're going to start just by drawing out a rectangle structure again, and as soon as I finish off the room we're going to get our hip structure again. Let's get into our tiled vertical view. So this is where we get a little creative with using our room directives in order to create different roof styles. So I'm going to create essentially three separate rooms. We're going to have a very small room in the center and two larger rooms on either side. Eventually we're going to get rid of the small room, but before we do that, let's set our gable, which is eventually going to become shed roofs. And from here, we're going to select this temporary room, open it up, and we're going to simply remove the roof over that room. So that's going to create two small gable structures. I'm going to get this wall a little bit closer so that they are right about at 3 feet apart. Alright, now each one of these walls, first of all I need to zoom in to make sure that my siding is facing the inside of this room. So I'm going to reverse that side and we'll nudge it again. Make that exactly 3 feet. Alright, now I'm going to select each one of these walls in turn and I'm going to change it to a high shed gable wall. So that's going to create that shed roof that we need on both sides. So we'll select both of those temporary walls and change them to sheds. Now we basically have a gable but with a hole here or a gap here in the middle. So now I need to alter the pitch of each of these roof planes. So first we're going to change this one to a shallower pitch. Let's change it to 4 and 12. And then I'm going to change this back one to 10 and 12. So now we've created the situation where we are going to be able to put windows in there to extend down into the room. And from this point, let's get back into our glass house that we've been using so we can see what's going on here. So I still have a ceiling over this room. So I'm going to open up my left room here, and under structure we're not going to remove the roof, but we are going to remove the ceiling over the room. And from here my roof is pretty well set. So I'm going to go back into my build roof dialog and uncheck auto rebuild roofs, so that now when I delete this wall, it's going to create our roof situation where we have two shed roofs that come together. And I'm also going to drop in some windows here so we can drop some light into the room below. So if we take a full camera view of this space, we can look up and see our windows. And we can also take this wall here, separating these two rooms, open it up, and let's make it an invisible wall. So we have just a big open room, but still with our light coming in. And invisible walls can also be very helpful for defining different rooms within a home. So if you have a space where you have two different roof heights going on within a space, sometimes it can be really handy to use an invisible wall to draw between them and change the different room heights, because even though we don't see this wall, these are still two separate rooms and can act accordingly. So as you see here, we have the ceiling over one area of this room and not over another. Alright, so now we're going to exit out of here and we're going to open up our final plan. So we have our chic cottage plan, which is also available for download on our website. I'll show you where at the end of today's demonstration. So you can download and practice with this plan if you would like. So where we're at right now, if we take a full overview, we have all of our walls and the second floor drawn, and we have no roofs. So in this case, the plan has turned off auto rebuild roofs while we've been working on the plan itself. So now that we have all the walls drawn, we can go into build roof and turn back on those auto rebuild roof. And notice our pitch is set to 12 and 12 because we're going to do a much steeper pitch for living space under our attic. So we'll select OK. So this is the roof that it's just going to place on my plan. Now this is not quite the roof that we're going for. If we look at our chic cottage plan, you can see we have living space in our attic like we're going to do now, and then there's quite a few different gables and changes that we're going to make to this roof. So let's go ahead and start by changing our ceiling height on our second floor. So let's tile these so we can see what changes we're making as we change them. And we're going to open up our second floor room here, and we're going to go down to structure and change this. Let's do 18 inches. We're going to drop it down so that the roof comes 18 inches off of the second floor. So that's going to drop that roof down. Alright, so now let's take a look at our plan so we can see what we need to do next. Our garage wall, it looks like, needs to become a gable, as well as what's above our porch. We'll just minimize this until we need it again. So here's our garage wall. We're just going to select that wall and change it to a gable. Then we'll select what's above our porch, this wall, and we'll change it to a gable. And it's automatically going to nest those gables. What I mean by that is that it didn't create a gable that came up and back down. it came up and met up with our original gable here. So it nested them. So now, if we take a look at our plan again, or our plan that we're creating, you can see we don't actually come down flat to meet up with this wall. We have two roof pitches coming off of this far porch wall. So we know how to do this from doing our gull wing earlier. We'll open up this wall, and in our roof panel we will select upper pitch. We're going to have a shallower pitch starting out. Let's do 6 and 12. And then the top is going to be the same pitch as the rest of the structure. Then we're going to start this one a good distance in from the baseline. Let's do 7 feet. And once that looks okay, we'll select OK. You can see that change. So now we have the nice shallow pitch and then the steeper pitch to meet up with the rest of the roof. So let's see what we need to do next. So it looks like this over here we have is a gable, and that ridge line is extending all the way across. So we're going to have a gable on the other side as well. So we'll select our left edge here, and we'll change that to a gable. So we can see that applied. And now we need to change the other side to a gable, but watch what happens when I select this wall and change it to a gable. It's going to do the full wall, but I need this ridgeline to extend across, and this end connecting to the garage needs to remain a hip. So we have two options to do this. I'm going to undo what I just did. And what we can do is we can either break the wall into two sections. So in order to know what my reference point is, I'm going to temporarily extend this wall across. And then I can come up and we have a break wall tool. This enables me to break this long wall into two sections so that I can select just the top portion and change that to a gable. So that's going to extend my ridgeline across and still have a roof plane bearing down on my garage section. The second way, if I undo what we just did, so we also have under our roof tools, a gable roof line option. So I select that. What this allows me to do is to click and drag out a line, and we'll drag it to approximately where that wall is. This is just asking me if I want to turn on the layer so we can see the line we just drew, so I'm going to select yes. And now it's going to create a gable exactly where I drew that line. So if I select that line and pull it back so we can see it a little bit better, you can see it looks just like our green dashed lines for the rest of our roof planes, but that's telling the roof where there should be a gable. It's essentially acting like we have selected gable within a wall. But breaking the walls into sections is another great way to have multiple roof directives within a single long expansive wall. Okay, so now the front of our house is pretty well done, other than the dormers and the roof returns. So we have a full roof return here in front, and then we have a partial roof return on the garage. So let's take a look at those first. So we'll open up this wall here, and we're going to do a full roof return. So in our roof, we'll select Auto Roof Return, change it over to Full, and select OK. So it's going to extend that all the way across to meet up with our roof. We'll do the same thing here in our garage wall, only instead of selecting a full roof return, we're going to do a gable, and let's set that 42 inches on either side in from our roof. So it's going to create our sloped roof return 42 inches on either side. Alright, so finally we have two dormers here in front. So we'll drop in those dormers. We'll come up to our roof tools and simply click to place that dormer on the roof. We can resize it if we want to, but that's the exact size I'm looking for, and then move it into position. Then I can select that dormer and we'll copy and pull out a copy right next to it. So we have two dormers side by side. Currently they are looking into attic space, but we'll be changing that here in just a minute. So now let's turn our attention to the back of the home. So we'll just scroll around to the back here, So here's what we have currently. We have a porch with a roof specified over the porch, and if we open up what the back of the home should look like, we need a second dormer that's going to be quite a bit larger, and then we have a gable and a shed roof on the back here. So we'll start with that gable because that's the easiest. We're going to need to go down to the first floor, and we'll select this back wall and change it to a gable. And then we're going to need to change the side over here to a gable to create that shed aspect. So we'll start with the porch wall, and that's not quite enough. We need to do this wall section as well, because if we scroll around here, you can see we still have a roof plane bearing on that one. So if we select that wall and change it to a gable, now we're looking at a very, very large shed. In fact, it actually turned it into essentially a nested gable, but that's not what we're looking for. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up this porch wall and we're going to change the pitch because 12 and 12 is way too steep for what we're trying to do here. So let's drop it down to 4 and 12 and see what that does. And that created exactly the situation that I was going for. So now it's going to just meet up with that roof line right there. And finally, we need one more dormer up here. So for the dormer, we're going to move up to the second floor, and we'll use our auto dormer tool. We'll click to drop that in, and then we're going to make some changes to it. So let's make that quite a bit wider, and we're going to move it down the roof pitch as well. And once that's in place, we'll resize this window a little bit. And that pretty much finishes off the roof of our house. The only thing we have left to do is raise the ceiling height so that we have room to live within this attic space. So our roof is set. We're going to go into our Build Roof dialog, uncheck Auto Rebuild Roofs, and then raise the ceiling height back up to, let's do 109 inches. And as soon as we do that, we can see all of our dashed lines telling us where the ceiling is. And if we take a camera view from inside this home, we can see the space that we've created up here in our attic. And we could continue working with that from here. So with that, we finish up our plan. Now I just want to show you a few things on our website, homedesignersoftware.com. If we go under our products drop-down menu, you can see the 4 products that we offer, and we have a product chooser. So this is going to be a point-by-point comparison of all 4 programs so you can see which one would be right for you. We also have a free trial download, so you can download any or all of the programs that we offer, and it's a completely free, unlimited time trial. Feel free to go and download those to test out the software. Under our User Center, we have training videos that will show you how to do various things within the software. We also have a knowledge base, which is a collection of help articles to help you out. They're also divided into different categories. So if you scroll down to roofs, you can see we have 40 different articles that'll walk you through step by step various things within the program. And they're searchable. So if we search for, let's just search for a clear story, we get an article that comes up that will explain how we go through that process. Also under our User Center, we have a samples gallery. So you can go and see sample plans. So this is the plan we were working with today, the Chic Cottage. You're welcome to go and download that. Or sample renderings, so different images, examples of what you can do with the software. We also have additional catalog and content that you can download for your program. And we have a user forum where you can connect with other users, ask questions, share advice. It's a great place to meet up and discuss ideas. And finally, under our User Center, we have additional training webinars that you can sign up for, like the one you're watching today, including our Advanced Roof Design webinar, which will go more into some of the Home Designer Pro options for roofs. And all of our webinars will be recorded and up on our YouTube channel. So if you scroll to the bottom of any page on our website, you can see a little link to YouTube that'll take you directly to where you can watch the recordings. So I want to thank you for attending today's Beginning Roof Design webinar. Just a reminder that we do have a free trial version, so you can go and test out everything that we've done today with the software. We also have a 30-day money-back guarantee, so after you purchase, you still have 30 days to return the program if for whatever reason it doesn't work for you. We offer discounts to upgrade both to newer versions, so if you're using an older version of our software, you'll receive a discount to upgrade, as well as to upgrade higher in the product line. So if you have Home Designer Suite, you'll receive credit to move up to the architectural or professional version. Please feel free to go and check out the different training resources we have on our website. And if you need any help choosing a product or you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to us. Our number and our email are listed here below. Thank you again for attending today, and I hope you have a wonderful day.